All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 2 of myself and ET's gaming podcast called Eats More Cereal. How you doing today?
Woohoo! We may have passed the first episode, Dar.
I
We did
know.
it.
I don't know
we,
how. I honestly do not know how.
we have not fallen into the trap of starting a brand new project, recording one episode, and then not touching it again. We have overcame that challenge. We've
Yeah.
done it.
One crazy feat.
Of course, of course, of course.
But first off, the first episode got what, like 83 views on YouTube, which
It's a lot. It's a lot more than we were expecting.
no, I did not expect that
I,
many. Oh my god.
That's
So
crazy.
I appreciate everyone who watched it, and I
Of
appreciate Tomas for listening to it 3 times.
course. Thank you, Tomas, for that one.
Thank you,
Appreciate that
Tomas.
one.
Thank you, Tomas.
Uh,
So yeah. Well, today's topic we're gonna mainly talk about linear versus non-linear games. I don't know if you saw on our socials. We had some polls going around a few days ago, I think.
of course. Yep.
Just to ask what your guys' opinions on them. Which
Oh
ones
yeah.
do you prefer? So we'll bring them up a bit later, but we just wanted to bring that up.
hmm
And we're going to talk about, there's one news article that we have, but other than that, we're just going to talk about linear games and non-linear, what we like about them, what we
Yeah.
don't, what's our favorites.
Yeah, we
Pretty,
won't be spending like a half hour on new stuff this time. We don't have as
no,
much to talk about this week, so
no.
be pretty short. Move on to the main topic pretty soon, but
Hmm.
still good to bring up though, because the
Exactly.
news is
Yeah.
pretty important.
Yeah. So our first news and our only news for today is actually a pretty big one. So Raven Software, which is they are they're owned by Activision Blizzard right now, and they
Yes.
recently won the union vote, which
hmm
is big, and it was unanimous. So it was a group of 28 quality assurance testers won their bid for a union, and this
Yep.
is the first union in AAA video game companies, as far as I'm sure, which is just
hmm
big in general because the industry has been a thing for so long, and the fact that it hasn't happened yet is honestly just kind of crazy, in my opinion.
I mean, yeah, it's a pretty big step. I mean, it's one of those things where given that gaming and esports industry, like that's a brand new industry. It's pretty new compared to like every other entertainment, every other media industry out there. The fact that these union votes are really starting, uh, at least with Raven Software, that's a huge step in the right direction, giving workers more power. I mean, yeah, it's just a really good thing to see, honestly, especially in the context of Activision Blizzard, given that them being owned by them. It bodes well for the future. I think it's really good to see.
Yeah, no, I'm really happy that this actually happened, and I remember hearing another thing a few days later, where, because I don't know if some of you don't know, Activision Blizzard is currently in the process of being bought by Microsoft. And there's a quote just from, pretty sure it was Phil Spencer,
Yeah.
my favorite guy in the gaming industry.
Oh, he
Um,
loves gaming. He loves gamers.
he loves gaming and gamers. But he said that we respect to and continue to support Raven and their union vote throughout the merger, which
Which
is
is
just good.
awesome.
It's a good thing to say. It's nice.
Mhm.
And I hope that this means more better stuff for Activision Blizzard in general. But that was just something I wanted to mention because
Yeah, I mean,
it's a pretty big thing.
just a final note on it. I mean, it's one of those industries where you really need to have unions like this.
Hmm.
Having unions like this gives the workers so much more power. And I mean, it's tough because it's a pretty exploitative industry. When it comes
Yeah.
to either game development or just esports in general. So having unions like this, people have been calling for them for years. But it's just awesome to see that it's finally happening, and I really hope this opens the door for all kinds of other unions to form and make it a lot more equal for everyone in the industry.
Yeah. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna talk about which one do you want to do first? You want to do linear or non-linear?
I say we flip a coin, Dar. I think
We
we
flip a
switch it
coin.
up. You know, we
How do you want to flip a
No
coin
one,
right
no one
now?
can answer. That's a great question. I can pull one up in a web browser. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So, so what do you? Which one's which? What linear,
Heads
non-linear?
linear, tails nonlinear.
All right. Heads linear, tails non-linear. All right. Heads. All right. Linear games. Linear games first. Let's do it.
All right. Do you wanna start off?
Yeah, sure. So, talking about linear games, I assume we're mostly referring to just single player games here.
Yeah.
It's just games that, play in your spare time, all that sort of thing. So, when it comes to linear games, it works very similar to just any other, book, movie, form of media you're used to, right? It's
Hmm.
to define it is literally just it mostly even refers to a narrative of the game,
Yeah.
in the sense that when you start the game, beginning of a story, all that sort of thing. As you progress through the game and play it more and more, you make your way through the story, continuing the narrative, and then at the end, the story ends, the narrative ends, and that's the end of the game. Maybe
Hmm.
there's a couple like after post game sort of events and stuff you can do, but the main bulk of the game is just playing through the main narrative in a linear fashion. You don't have to worry about. It's not necessarily you don't have choice, but it's that the game is structured in that specific way.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's the easiest way to define it. It's very similar to just reading a book, watching a
Hmm.
movie that you'd
Hmm. Hmm.
expect. It all follows the same plot line, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
No, I get that. I think one of the examples of a linear game right now is probably, which I technically like haven't played, but I know the Uncharted games are
oh yeah.
nearly 100% linear.
Mhm.
That like even though there's like freedom in some areas, but it's basically you go there, you kill this guy, and it's very tells you what to do.
Yeah.
And we're not saying it's a bad thing. There are good and bad things to both of these for linear
Yeah.
and non-linear. Uncharted is just like a really good example
Oh
of
yeah.
it.
I mean, going even bigger than that, like take the first ever Super Mario game, right? It's a
Yeah.
side scroller. It's just Super Mario Brothers on the NES.
Hmm. Hmm.
It it is structured in that you have worlds to go through. You have world one, and then you just go level by level by level by level by level until you finish the world, and then you go to world two, level, world three, world four, and it just continues all the way until the end. And then once you beat Bowser, you're done. That you're done with the game.
Yeah.
That's the entirety of the game.
Yeah.
You don't really have much choice when it comes to branching off of that. Even the amount of choice you do have, it still doesn't stray too far from a main goal, which is just beat Bowser. And every single level you play through there is all intended to follow that same path towards beating him. So
Yeah. No, I think linear games are specifically interesting in the way that they're made because when you're comparing it to like, because obviously multiplayer games are not that linear, but even though some multiplayer games have like campaigns, like Call of Duty, they
yep.
have
Hmm.
those campaigns which are completely different. But I think that it just allows for so much more narrative building than you would have in just like a multiplayer game.
Yeah. I mean, what's I think the key takeaway from linear games and the reason why people love them so much is just the fact that there is structure there, right?
Hmm.
Compared to a non-linear game where you have all this freedom, all this ability to sort of go whichever direction you want to go, do whatever you want to do. People like that structure in games. People like just being like, all right, let's follow this narrative, let's follow this story. I could just do sort of what the game tells me to do, and I could just perfect doing that throughout the game. See my
Hmm.
character grow, see, you know, just do that. People like that structure. Um, Especially compared to non-linear games where some people may just feel lost when you're presented with so many different options and you really aren't given like a direction on where to go. um, I think that's one of the key benefits to linear games is that being able to just
Yeah.
follow a storyline, just sit down, know exactly what you're supposed to do, and where to go and how to play. People like that. It makes it a lot easier to just get into, compared to say a non-linear game where it's a lot more freeform.
Yeah, I think my favorite, in my opinion, most recent example of a linear
Mhm.
game that I've fully completed and played is the not recently released, somewhat recently released Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, which
Mhm.
I've told you to buy a few times now.
Of course.
Is is a really great
Big name.
game that basically you're playing as the main character, Star-Lord, and you have your whole group of all your other teammates. But it is a linear game, and you're kind of like skewed to go in this place. Like you can like go through different areas somewhat to find like new costumes or like some gear to upgrade your abilities, but it really leads you in one direction. But the way that it's executed is really well done with the atmosphere and just how
Mhm.
everything looks. Because especially when you're on a guided path, you can make everything look so like beautiful um and structured. So
Oh yeah,
that I recently completed that game and fully completed it, and I loved it.
yeah.
It's an amazing game.
I think one of the key takeaways from what you just said there is the fact that when you're on a set path, you can make it more structured and beautiful. Because from a game development point of view, right? If you're going
Hmm.
through this linear game, if you know that you're creating a game and you know that players are going to be following this very specific path, and you know that players are going to be doing this specific gameplay, it's a lot easier to create the game around that, right? Because if you know that compared to like a non-linear game, right, where people can go wherever they want and go in a million different directions, it's a lot
Hmm.
tougher to create and formulate that gameplay experience that's
Yeah,
perfect in every single one of those directions, right? If you
exactly.
have a
Yeah.
linear game, say like Pokemon Snap, you know the concept of Pokemon Snap,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, I
Right?
do.
It's basically an on the rails
Hmm.
game where you basically hop in a cart, go through a level, and throughout an entire time, you go and just take pictures of Pokemon, right?
Yeah.
Very
Yeah. Yeah.
simple, very straightforward. But what's great about Pokemon Snap is that it's a beautiful game. It's
It's
an
beautiful. Yeah.
incredible game, especially the new one that came out on the Switch.
Yeah.
The reason it can be so beautiful is because no matter what, the player's always going to be on that cart and always following that same path. It's similar to like an amusement park, right? Where you're on like a roller coaster or on something like they can form the experience around that path because they know no one's ever going to stray from a path because you can't. So they
Hmm.
make that entire path even more beautiful because they can afford to. They have
Exactly. Yeah.
all the resources for making that one path be as beautiful as it can, and there you go. It's compared to a non-linear game where, Pokemon Snap was like an open world game or so,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Where you're going around the entire world like Breath of the Wild, and you could take pictures of Pokemon, right? You
Jesus. Oh my
like
God.
think about how difficult that would be to make every single bit of that open world look just as beautiful as every other part. Like it's tough because you can't really.
Yeah.
It's such
Yeah.
a wider scale that it's a lot more difficult to do just from a game design perspective. And that's what's really cool about linear games is that you can formulate these
Hmm.
beautiful experience because you know for a fact that the players are going to be going through that specific route. And again, not just for Pokemon Snap, not just for Guardians of the Galaxy, just any linear game, like following like the gameplay flow of just playing through the game, finding a cool cutscene because you're going through that specific area at the right time. It just helps create that narrative, and it's very similar to a movie in that respect. It's really,
Yeah.
really cool to see.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there's a lot of great things to like about linear games, especially for people who maybe just may not like non-linear games, because non-linear
Mhm,
games are kind of um, if we're talking about just just single player campaign experiences,
mhm.
then non-linear games are more like open world. But also talking about multiplayer games, there's just preferences that people have where they will probably be skewed towards linear games because
Mhm.
there's just a straight path and a straight goal, which may be
Yeah.
more feasible for some people than Breath of the Wild, an open world game where there's like a million of things to
Oh
do, and
yeah.
you kind of just spawn in there, and you're like, what do I do next?
I think I actually want to touch on multiplayer a little bit because
Yeah,
even I
yeah,
know
go
we're
ahead.
mainly focusing on single player, but I think when it comes to linear games,
No, yeah, go ahead.
I think it's very important to note that when it comes to multiplayer, the main aspect of it is co-op.
Hmm.
And I think co-op linear games are amazing. Being able to follow through the same storyline with a couple of friends, with a couple of
Yeah,
homies,
no.
you're going through it together, working together to try and make it work. Even just something like a game as simple as like Left 4 Dead, where you're basically just
Oh,
a group
yeah.
of like 3 or 4 people trying to just make your way through a level, killing zombies left and right, and just working together to beat it. I mean, it's
Hmm.
really really fun. And experiencing that with a couple of your friends is really really cool, and it's a lot different than, say, like a non-linear open world game, for multiplayer where say you're just facing other people, you're not necessarily you may have people on your team, but you're not necessarily like going through a storyline together. Being able to go through a narrative with other people is something that's really, really cool and fun. And I think that makes it really different too, compared to something like movies or books.
Hmm.
Because while you can read a book with more like multiple people and you can watch a movie with multiple people, you're not really gonna be, you know, going through you can't really like discuss it with everyone else unless you're like watching at
Yeah.
home, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And while you can, it doesn't have any impact on how the movie goes. You still have those cool moments where like say a plot twist happens and like
Hmm.
everyone reacts to it and it's really cool.
Yeah.
When it comes to a co-op multiplayer game that goes through a linear storyline, that's really, really cool because your actions all direct out just they determine what happens in the game. Because if you all fail, you have to play through the same segment again. There isn't a risk of failure there,
Yeah.
which I think is really cool. And being able to alter the outcome of a game depending on how you personally play and how you work with your team and with your friends, that's
Hmm.
so cool. And it's such an interactive experience that no other form of media can really have, which I think is really awesome.
No, yeah, those are a lot of great things that you said. Another like
Thank you.
example of like like a good example of that is like Castle Crashers. I love Castle
Oh yeah,
Crashers. Yeah,
Castle
no,
Crashers is so good.
I've completed that game on Xbox like 10, 15 times, but I'd always play with like my cousins whenever they would be over or my sister when we were
Mhm.
younger, and that game's just such a blast. And
Oh
so
yeah.
yeah, co-op games with linear are just so good.
Oh yeah.
Um,
So question, Dar.
okay,
Before we
okay,
we move on to non-linear, I want to.
okay.
What is your preference between linear and non-linear? If you had to choose,
Ooh.
if you had to,
I can't say in the middle
I
because I
mean,
like a mix.
you can if you had to pick one, because trust me, I
Okay,
like a
okay,
mix too, but I think I
okay.
do have a preference.
I like. I think I like linear. I think
You
I
like
like
linear?
linear more, but like I'll bring it up in a minute, in a bit. But
And non-linear?
I have a specific game that's more like in the middle.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah,
Because I also prefer linear games,
yeah.
which funny enough.
Hmm.
When I'm like looking through my Steam library, when I'm looking for a game to play, I love just sitting down, dedicating an entire evening to just going through an entire narrative in a game. I like being able to sit down, finish a game in a couple days, work through the storyline. I love that. That I really like having that direction in terms of playing the
Hmm.
game.
Yeah, no, I completely get that.
But I still love non-linear games as well. So I we will talk about that. Um, so yeah, go ahead with whatever you were planning on saying.
All
Sorry
right.
to interrupt there.
So no, no, you're good. You're good. It was good to mention because I think we're gonna once we talk about nonlinear games a bit more, we'll have to bring up the polls that we did
Of
and the
course, of
and
course.
our own opinions even more. So I mean, we kind of touched on nonlinear a bit, but a basic explanation of what a nonlinear game is specifically single player mainly. Is basically a game affects lets the player affect where they go next. It's kind of like you have like a branching path, and you
It's
can
more
kind of do
freeform.
what you
More
want. Yeah,
freeform.
it's way more free. This is a lot. This is really common with like open world games where you can literally
Open
do
world is the
whatever you
easiest
want.
way to do a non-linear game.
Hmm.
Because
It.
when it comes to non-linearity,
Hmm.
um, having an open world and just letting the player decide where they want to go physically within that world, that's the easiest way to make it non-linear. It could still
Yeah.
follow a storyline, it could still do all the things that linear games can do, but it just gives the player more freedom and allows them to really sort of form the story around what they want
Hmm.
and in the order they want to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And nonlinear are kind of interesting because a good example of this is Minecraft. Probably
I mean,
one of the
that
best examples because you could
I
do
mean, yeah,
what
that's true.
you could do
That's
whatever
true.
you want. You
You
could
could
do
say, yeah,
whatever you want. And maybe it's not really Minecraft doesn't have that much story to
yeah.
it. But in the
There is a
main,
way to beat it. Beating
there
the
is a
Ender
way to beat
Dragon
it.
is the end of Minecraft, but you don't even have to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Because like when you compare it to a game like Skyrim, which is non-linear, you can
Mhm.
literally do whatever you want. There's obviously a way to beat it, but there's like so much more story that takes place in the other smaller things that you end
Yeah.
up doing. With
There's
Minecraft,
also multiple ways to beat Skyrim too. Like
there
it's not
is.
just one specific ending.
Hmm.
There are multiple ways to beat it. there's also just personal goals. Like if you want to like set a goal for either like a speed run, you could either do just make a specific goal for yourself. Like, oh, I want to get this many of this
Yeah,
item or
exactly.
whatever. And then I want to unlock, every achievement in the game. That could be considered, completing the game for some people. I want to unlock every potion in the game, get every weapon in the game, that sort of
Hmm.
thing.
Yeah,
That could
no,
be someone's definition of beating that game. It's not tied directly to a narrative linear game. Because if
hmm,
you're playing a narrative linear game, you don't really beat the game until you beat the main storyline. It's a
exactly.
lot more obvious in that respect, right? If you're playing through the original Super Mario Brothers and you make it to World like 4 and then like stop playing, you'll be like, you technically haven't beaten the game because you haven't gotten through and
Exactly,
done the
yeah.
railroaded, path to the
Hmm.
exit. Again, you still have those same challenges of like speed running or like trying to get to like specific places in specific times, that sort of thing. So there are like personal goals that, allow people to say beat the game even if they
Exactly.
haven't gone through a main story. But at the end of the day, non-linear games have a lot more freedom in that respect.
No, yeah, exactly. I think nonlinear is specifically more interesting just because of there are so many more aspects that you have to take into account of, especially if it's an open world one. Like with the common thing that you see from open world games is you have like, I mean, mainly Ubisoft, but you see like that tower that like unlocks different what's it called, like seeing points or whatever on your
Oh
map,
yeah.
and just like the small challenges that can either be, depending on how you make them, either tedious and boring or actually somewhat interesting,
Oh yeah.
to make
And side
your,
quests.
yeah, exactly, side quests to kind of make your open world area more worth it or
Yeah.
worthwhile, in
I
my opinion.
Do you want to just get Breath of the Wild out of the way?
Yeah,
Because
yeah, I haven't even beat it, but let's just get
we
Breath of
can
the Wild out of
we
the way.
cannot we just can't talk about non-linear games without Breath of the Wild. We just can't.
No, we can't.
It's
No, we
probably the
can't.
biggest game within the past 5 years or so. It came out 5 years ago, which is
That's
scary. Um,
that's weird. That's
but I mean,
weird.
it's huge. It's an absolutely huge game. And I mean, for those who don't know, The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, it's basically just a Legend of Zelda game, but where the main goal defeat Ganondorf, save Zelda, just like any other Zelda game. But what makes it different is that it's an open world non-linear game. So when Link wakes up from a coma or whatever, learns that he has to save Zelda from Ganon, he has a lot of options, you know? He can What's incredible about Breath of the Wild is that as soon as you start the game, you
Hmm.
can just go straight to the final boss.
Yeah.
You could just go straight to Ganondorf and with like a pot lid and like a stick, you could try your luck at beating the final boss with just that. And people have done that, which is really, really cool.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's just a massive, massive open like world that you are
Hmm.
thrown into and you're basically told go out, explore, learn about what you need to actually beat the final boss and go through all of these various, challenges and stuff to make yourself stronger and grow as a character and learn to finally become strong enough to beat the final boss. And that's what people love about Breath of the Wild. People love the fact that if you just spawn in a world, you can look at like a tower in the distance and be like, I want to go to that tower and I want to do whatever the hell is over there. They could do that. Nothing is
Yeah.
stopping
No.
them.
Nothing.
You could do the challenges in any order that you want. You could go explore the world, do all these side quests. And I think it's important to note side quests in general within
Hmm.
these non-linear games
Yeah.
because what's what non-linear games really have above um, linear games is the idea of open worlds and creating a world that feels lived in and like a really like incredible world where everyone is interacting, which
Yeah.
is really really cool because when you're playing through Breath of the Wild and you're going through and going to all these big like towns and villages, so you have like the town with all like the fish people and the
Yeah.
town with all like in the middle of a desert, and all of that. You can go there and do all these side quests which teach you about the culture of that town and teach you about like all this in-depth lore about side characters that you didn't even care about before. But
Yeah.
it makes the world feel so much more alive than just a linear game could do because you don't have that freedom
Hmm.
to explore. Being able to really explore the world, help people out with these side quests is really really fun. And especially when it comes to like shrines and like mini dungeons in Breath of the Wild, being able to just do everything at your own pace is what makes it really endearing to a lot of people. People can just pick up a game, play a little bit, try and do like a dungeon or two, maybe just wander around and like ride a horse for a bit. You could do whatever you want in the game. It doesn't
Yeah.
really matter. That's what's really, really fun. And I think that's why people love Breath of the Wild so much, is that you really just have that freedom to do whatever you want, go
Yeah.
wherever you want, and just play the game at your own pace.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting with the way that it like non-linear games are just especially if those side quests are done right, like
Mhm.
it can completely just even overshadow the main
Oh yeah,
storyline,
definitely.
in my opinion. And so now I'm gonna ask you, without Breath of the Wild, I don't know if it is Breath of the Wild, but I'm not. I'm just gonna say you can't mention that,
Of course, of course.
just just so we get something else in there.
Mhm.
So what would you say is your favorite non-linear game?
I'm gonna say Endless Ocean from a Nintendo Wii.
What?
Easiest question. Easiest
Endless,
question of my
endless.
life.
Wait, what? Endless.
Endless Ocean 2 for the Nintendo Wii. Endless Ocean
You
Blue
thought of this
World.
before, didn't you?
It's my favorite game of all time, and
On
it's
the
not even
Wii.
close.
Okay, I'm literally looking this up right now.
It's labeled as shovelware
What?
in so many places. It's labeled as shovelware. People
What
don't
is
know
this
what Endless
game?
Ocean is. So what Endless Ocean is, I'm gonna do my pitch
Is
for
this why
what
you like
Endless Ocean is.
Abzu?
Yes, it's also why I like Abzu, and I'm actually going to bring up that comparison in the sense that Abzu is a linear game and Endless Ocean is a non-linear game.
Okay.
So here I go.
Okay. Okay.
Endless Ocean Blue World. It is a game where you are a scuba diver and you basically go to all of these various places around the world. You know, you got like the
Mm-hmm.
Arctic Sea,
Okay. Okay.
uh, the Arctic Circle. You got
Yeah.
a river in the Amazon. You
Mm-hmm.
have just a massive trench in the middle of the ocean. You know, the
Okay.
depths in the abyss. You have beautiful coral reefs and massive shipwrecks. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful
Yeah.
game. It's similar. Um, or actually, no, I'm not gonna bring it by comparison. But basically, the way it works is you're playing through the game. It is a narrative. It is a
Mm-hmm.
storyline.
Okay.
Where every single time you progress, every single time you start at this one coral reef. The beginning area is a coral
Yeah.
reef, and there is a quest, like a main quest, in the
Yeah.
sense of, going through this coral reef, going to go find this one artifact or whatever, to help progress the story. So you go, you could do that, and then you could just move on to the next area, easy peasy, no worries. But by doing just that, you are missing out on like 80% of the rest of that coral reef.
Oh my
Because if you
God.
keep looking in that coral reef, you find a bunch of fish you didn't find before. The entire point of the game is to basically look at all these really cool fish, all these cool
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
this cool marine life, and like explore and like find treasure underwater, and explore these shipwrecks, and fight off against very angry sharks and like things that want to kill you while underwater. It's very similar to like Subnautica in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just really fun. I don't know why. It was like one of my favorite Wii games back in the day, but being able to just go explore all of these various parts of like the world in the ocean and rivers, and it's just amazing. And having the freedom to go around, do
Mm-hmm.
these side quests. There's What's amazing is that there's a side quest for every dolphin that you find in the game. There's a side quest,
The side quest for a dolphin.
a dolphin. So every area has at least one dolphin that you can befriend, and there's a
Okay.
side quest for every single one.
Wait, I
In
love
terms of
that.
befriending it, and then once you get back to the surface, go back to the hub of just you basically have a little private island where the scuba place is based, and you can basically play with the dolphins, train it, have a do cool tricks and stuff, and like be like really cool friends, and then you can dive with the dolphin, and it can help you while out
Wait,
in the
that's actually
ocean.
that's
It's
pretty
really
cool.
really cool. It's really fun, and just the environments that the game creates. Like there's one area where you go to this underwater ruins, go down a well, and boom, you are in an underwater sunken castle.
What
And you have
the?
to go through this castle, find out all the traps, find out all of like the treasure that the castle has using your little underwater metal detector, and then
Okay, okay.
go through and learn the just discover the progressing of the plot. It's really really cool. It's the plot itself pretty basic. It's nothing crazy, but it's really fun to just go around and learn more about it. Like there's this one really dark part where you have to like both literally and figuratively where you have to go to the depths of the abyss, like the bottom of what you would consider to be the Mariana Trench.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can't see anything. And
No,
it's
no, not.
terrifying because there are things wanting to kill you down there. Um and you know, you have to go down, find the sunken submarine where, you know, divers have straight up died down there. It's terrifying. And then that helps progress the plot until eventually you get to the end where you get to this sunken Egyptian ruins. And you have to solve all these puzzles about the Egyptian gods, and you have to go through and, you
Okay.
know, find all of like the cool myths and learn about everything about that specific part of the ocean. It's just really, really fun. And
Mm.
I could go on for hours about how amazing that game is, but I think it does the non-linear world perfectly. Because even after you go through a main quest line, there's a ton of stuff that you could do. You can have other people, you can give other people, like other NPC characters, tours of places
Hmm.
you've visited, and then also help fend off things that want to attack you while you're giving a tour. It's really cool.
Yeah,
There's,
yeah.
you know, treasure, a bunch of treasure you can collect. There's filling out the marine encyclopedia, which was my favorite part. It's sort of like the Pokédex
Okay. Yeah,
in like
yeah.
a Pokemon game, but it's terrifying because you have to actually go through the depths of the water and the ocean where, you know, you're not necessarily completely safe.
No, no, no.
One of the scariest parts is going to the map in Antarctica because there is no seafloor. It's the entire top is covered in ice, so you can't just surface at any time and get air. You
Oh
have
my
to look for
God.
holes in the ice where you can actually surface and get air. And if you keep going down, there's not a bottom. You just see these towering icebergs that go really, really deep, and it goes really, really dark, and it's terrifying because you have this eerie music playing wherever you go, and it's just incredible. I could go on for hours about that game. I'm not gonna keep going because we could have an entire episode on that. But I'm gonna now compare it to Abzu, which is
Okay.
another
Okay.
underwater game.
I've heard of it.
So
Yeah.
Abzu is it's as linear of a game as it can get. Um, it's similar in the sense that you go through different sort of areas under the water, but as you're going through, you're basically railroaded in the right direction.
Okay.
You're basically told, all right, this is where you go, this is what you have to do, just keep going through.
Yep.
And what's amazing about Absu is that there are parts where there's like small puzzles here and there, but but being able to play Absu is so different compared to any other game I've ever played. It's more of like an
Hmm.
interactive story than any other game. Sort of similar to say like Telltale games where you're not really playing it, you're just sort of clicking the right prompts and like more of like the discussion and like the commentary on it. Um, but playing through Abzu, you're playing it because the visuals are absolutely spectacular. The
Hmm.
visuals in Abzu are some of the greatest visuals I've ever seen in any video game
I've seen
ever.
some footage of it and it looks
It is
pretty
amazing.
beautiful.
It's beautiful, and that paired with a soundtrack, the reason it's one of my favorite games just of all time is the fact that it's just an experience. It's similar to like a movie, it's similar to like a book, but just playing through the game and the combination of the visuals and the music and the plot line, it's just amazing. I actually cried at the end of it because of how amazing it was. Um, and it's similar to Endless Ocean in the sense that it's underwater
Hmm.
as a
No,
start.
no, no way.
It's underwater, which is crazy.
No way.
But then it's also you're still going to these different areas. You're still going throughout like a bunch of different areas. You go through a coral reef. You go through the depths and like the very dark abyss. There's like an underwater robot pyramid thing that you have to destroy. It's terrifying.
What the?
Um, it's crazy, but it's also different from Endless Ocean in that it's not an open world game.
Okay.
You can explore pieces of the area, but mostly you're still just sort of going through, progressing throughout the game. But also, there's not really any loading screens in the game either. All of it's pretty much seamless, and you can go through the entire game maybe only having like one or two loading screens, which is crazy. It's really really cool. But I just think that really shows that both linear and non-linear games have their benefits. They both
Hmm.
have, you know, these are two of my favorite games of all time, and I don't think I could pick one of over the other simply
Exactly.
because they're so different. You can't really compare these games that much because
No.
they serve different purposes and they serve different audiences. So that's my spiel for that. You can talk because I need a drink of water.
Okay,
After
well,
talking about that.
I
Sorry
like
for my
no,
rant
no,
on
no,
Endless Ocean.
you are completely okay. You do not need to apologize
Of
for
course,
that. But I
go for
like
it.
how you brought up a distinct example of linear and a distinct example of nonlinear. And what I would like to bring up, which I should bring up every episode,
The Mass
is
Effect
it.
trilogy,
Yeah,
baby.
there we go.
Let's
So a
go.
good example of mix of linear
Linearity.
linearity, yeah,
There you go.
is the trilogy in total, but mainly I'm focusing on Mass Effect 3
Hmm.
right now because the thing about Mass Effect 3 is that this it has a story with an overarching goal, but you're
Hmm.
kind of free to roam with different optional objectives that you can do. But the thing is that all of these simultaneously um, help increase the goal you're trying to get at the end of the game. So a quick explanation of how this system works in Mass Effect 3 is there's a thing called the war effort. So there's a big war happening in Mass Effect 3. I won't
Yeah,
explain the
give give
narrative
give
of it.
like give a quick rundown of a plot, like very
Okay.
quick.
So for Mass Effect 3 specifically, it opens up with an invasion happening on the main planet, Eden Prime. Or yeah, I think so. And by these big creatures called like the Reapers. And so basically, what you're trying to do the entire game is to get enough resources for the war effort to get on the final assault. That's basically as simple as I could explain it without getting too much into specifics and stuff. So every single side mission, side quest, or just side stuff you do for either your squad mates or other NPCs will get you at least some war effort resources. And there's a bar that you fill by the end of the game. If you fill all of it and then you do the final mission, you get there's a secret ending you can get. But what I'm trying to say is that it's linear in a sense where it's kind of guiding you to the end, but at the same time it's nonlinear where there are so many other options that you can do, but they all help that main ending. So it's
Mhm.
kind of I think it's a great comparison of like having both of them kind of combined, and it's why I love this trilogy so
Oh yeah.
much, and I will try and talk about it in every episode, or at
Of
least
course,
mention it in every episode, depending
of
on
course.
what topics we talk about.
We can make it
And
work.
like
We can make it work.
I can make it work. But that's kind of my good example of like a mix of both. And Mass Effect 2 and 1 are kind of similar in a way, but I think Mass Effect 3 does the mix the most. Mass Effect 1 is probably the most linear. Mass Effect 2 is like a bit of mix, but then Mass Effect 3 is like, yeah, this is like a complete mix of linear and non-linear, which is a good thing. Like it's not a bad thing either. We're not saying any of these examples are bad versions of it. You can obviously make a linear game poorly, but we're trying to say that like there are good things for linear games and non-linear games, or like a mix, basically. Is kind of what we're
Yeah,
trying to
of
say.
course. Oh man, that there's so much to talk about with linear and non-linear. There's so many examples out there. I mean, it's pretty much any game can be split into one of those two groups, I feel.
No, I know, and
Or that, or a combination of the two, like Mass Effect.
yeah, it's basically it's one of those main choices you kind of have to do in game development and game design, especially for making a single player game, because it starts asking a bunch of the other questions. Like if you're doing a non-linear game, like, oh, okay, well, is this going to be open world? Or is it going to be a bit more less open world? And you kind of have to decide from there what kind of side stuff you're going to implement, or if it's going to be linear. It's kind of like one of the main questions that you have to ask yourself when you're starting to make a new game.
Mhm.
um, it's one of those big questions. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Eh,
So if you guys didn't know, I think we mentioned this obviously earlier, but we did a poll on our Twitter and our Instagram asking you
mhm.
guys if you guys preferred linear or non-linear um, games. And if you want to bring up Twitter, I'll bring up Instagram. So
Yeah. Sure.
Instagram, we had a 73. So Instagram had about like six, or it was actually like 10 votes. And we had a 73% in linear games and a 27% in non-linear games. And I thought that was pretty interesting. I was kind of expecting linear games to be the one that most people voted
Yeah.
for.
That surprised me, as someone who likes linear games a lot more. But but yeah, no, I know what you mean. I mean, I think it comes down to what people consider to be linear and non-linear games and
Hmm.
what their experiences are with most recent, right? So
Exactly.
like think about all the big games that have come out in the past 4 or 5 years.
Hmm.
Most of them are non-linear, I think.
Most of them are.
I
I
want to say
think.
non-linear game. Oh, the fact that open world games, like people have been calling for open world games for franchises that don't even, uh, need open world, but it's
Like
just one of
Sonic.
like Sonic. Yeah, it's just one of those things that I feel like open world games have become sort of a staple of the
Yeah.
gaming industry in the past couple of years. People love open world games, and honestly, um, deservedly so. They're really really fun, and the quality of games has just gone up so much that
Hmm.
you know why not? People love non-linear games, and there are still good linear games out there, but I feel like the public perception's mostly shifted over to
No,
non-linear.
it definitely has, especially with the rise of like multiplayer
Oh,
gaming in the
definitely.
past,
Yeah.
not even just recently, but just in general, the rise
Hmm.
of that type of genre. There is just way more of a interest in non-linear games like MMOs. MMOs are a great example of like non-linear games in a sense, and
Oh
where you
yeah,
have
definitely.
and you just have so many other people with you, and there's so many things you can do. Like, yeah,
I
it's
mean, that's also proven by the Twitter poll, I think, where the Twitter poll, 100% of people picked non-linear games, which I mean that proves it right there.
yeah.
People love non-linear games, and that's not a bad thing at all. I personally like linear games, but trust me, I have a soft spot for non-linear games like Endless Ocean, like that. It's so fun to just have the freedom to do whatever you want and to just log in, play, boot up a game, and just boom,
Hmm.
play a little bit,
Yeah,
get off for a night, and that's it. It's not having that freedom is what a lot of people value, I think.
yeah. It kind of helps with identifying the way you play your own character, especially when there are a lot of different ways to like customize your character and also
Oh
just
yeah, definitely.
play out a mission. It gives a
For
lot of
sure.
more like identity to how you're playing the game in a sense.
People like
Um,
the freedom. It's great.
exactly. Yeah. Um, well, I think that sums it up then.
That's pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty
Yeah.
good for linear and non-linear. Otherwise, we're just going to be going in circles.
Yeah.
But
No, we really will be would be going in circles if we kept talking about it, which
of
couldn't be a bad thing, but
course.
also could be a bad thing. But so first off, cereal.
Let's talk about cereal, Dar. Let's talk about cereal. Let's remember this
Okay,
this podcast has a name,
it has a name.
and
Yeah,
its name has cereal.
it
In
does.
fact,
It does.
we're eating more cereal.
We are. We're eating
So
more of it.
let's talk cereal. We talked a
Okay,
bit about cereal last
we did.
episode.
We did.
We did.
I brought up.
Specifically
Look.
Lucky Charms.
Yeah.
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 So uh on this podcast, we are going to be delving more into cereal as we progress. I know first episode, still figuring some stuff out, but we have determined that we need to focus a bit more on cereal. We gotta live up to the name of eating more cereal. So
Exactly.
rather than just talking about our favorite cereals, something pretty freeform, something non-linear, I could say. Let's make it more linear, Dart. Let's make it more linear. And given that it's our favorite style of game, and we are going to be ranking cereals
Yes.
as we go through our podcast.
Yeah.
So each episode,
Hmm.
we are going to be ranking one cereal. Nothing crazy. We got to make sure we can continue it throughout multiple episodes, of course. And we are going to be uploading them onto a tier list, a visual tier list that will be on our YouTube and will be on our social pages afterwards as well. So our
Yes.
Twitter, our Instagram, at Eats More Cereal, of course.
There we go. There we go.
Feel free to follow. Feel free to
Hmm.
like and subscribe as you would.
Hmm.
Um, but let's just talk about it, Arlo. So in terms of a tier list, let's say how many tiers we want? We're thinking
Let's
S
do.
tier. S
Yeah.
tier's
S tier.
number one, of course.
A.
A,
B.
B, C,
C.
D,
D.
and F. D and
Yeah.
F.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay. Okay.
So go ahead and talk about what we talked about last episode. Let's give a little rehash
Okay. Okay.
of last episodes.
I won't say too much, but so last time we talked about Lucky Charms,
Of
which
course,
I
of
would
course.
say
A strong start, I'd
a
like to add.
strong start, a very strong start. I would say I say A tier. I mean, I could say S, but that's just me being greedy. So I
I
think
think
I'm gonna
that's a
go with
lot. I
A
think that's
tier.
high for Lucky Charms. Is S tier? No.
No. Okay. Okay.
I'm let's see. A tier. A tier is pretty good. A tier
Yeah,
is like one of the
I
best.
think Lucky Charms are pretty good.
Wow. That's I'm gonna agree with you on that one. I'm gonna
Okay.
agree
Okay.
that Lucky Charms are A tier. I don't think they're the best. I think there are
No.
definitely
No. No.
cereals that are better,
Mhm.
and deserve the extra tier above. But I think A is a good place to start for Lucky Charms. I think,
Okay.
yeah, that's a good place to go.
Yeah.
Now for this episode,
Hmm.
I actually have next to me some
Live.
Cheerios, live cereal review. It's not even live because we aren't streaming this live, but we're working on it.
We're working on
Um,
it. We're working
so
on it.
these are, of course, these are not uh what many people would claim to be the best Cheerio. These are not Honey Nut Cheerios. They are not, apple cinnamon or
No.
anything crazy. They're just plain old Cheerios, Heart healthy, low cholesterol. Let's see, what do we got here? 140 calories per serving. Not bad, not
Okay.
bad.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you, Dar. I think Cheerios are an A tier cereal as well. Plain Cheerios. I don't know if that's a hot take
I
or not, but I think they're good.
no. I think yeah. I think you're right about that because I mean the thing with Cheerios is that they're probably the most basic
You
cereal out
can't go
there.
wrong. You
You
can't go
can't
wrong with
really
them.
go wrong. I mean, I prefer Honey Nut Cheerios.
Do you know what? If you prefer Honey Nut, would you say Honey Nut goes in S or A, and then we could put regular Cheerios down to B? Do you think that makes more sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Um. Hmm.
Do you think
Honey
Honey Nut
Nut.
Cheerios are S tier? That's what I want to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really? You
Yeah.
think they're S tier? I think they're
Yeah.
A.
Okay. Number
Where,
one.
wait, where? You guys are being spoiled. We are giving so many tiers already.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
cereals we haven't even covered yet.
And we don't even have 3 episodes yet. Like.
That's crazy. Look, the amount of content we are producing, Dar. Bef- Alright, so regular
Yeah.
Cheerios.
Regular Cheerios are probably like
I say
A
B.
tier, B tier, B
B.
tier. Yeah.
I'm willing to lower it to B just because I think while you can't go wrong with them, I don't think they're anything spectacular. I think they're good.
Yeah.
I think they're good. They're a little above average because assuming C tier is average, I think it makes sense to put Cheerios
Okay.
a little bit above that, Because I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
they're better than the average cereal, but I don't think they're anything to write home about, I think,
No.
you got Honey Nut, you got all these other guys. I actually think Apple Cinnamon's better than Honey Nut. I'm not gonna lie.
Well,
Um,
that's
that's a
for
hot
later.
take.
That's
That's
for
a hot
later.
take.
Let's not bring that
Wait,
up yet.
we'll talk about that later, at a later episode, of course. But yeah, you want to lock that in for Cheerios?
Yeah, yeah, and we'll if you're watching the YouTube version, we'll also put it up at the screen while we're talking about
Of
it.
course. Yep. We'll
But
figure it out, of course. So
we'll
there
also
we
have
go.
it being updated on our socials whenever
Yep.
we have a new episode come out.
And I mean, trust me, you're gonna want to listen to our reasoning for why we
Mhm.
put cereals in specific tier. Just seeing it on our socials, you're gonna be like, why in God's name did you put Fruit Loops at like S tier or something, right? You're gonna be like, what are they talking about? What
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
reasoning? What's going on in their head in which they think that this specific cereal, aka your favorite cereal, is in a bad tier? So lock it in. Lucky
All right.
Charms A tier,
Yep.
regular Cheerios B tier.
Hmm.
Boom.
All right.
Cereal tier list complete for this episode.
100%.
And
All
we have
right.
fulfilled our cereal quota for this episode as well, which is
Yes,
nice.
we've completed our cereal quota.
Always great to hear. Always great to hear,
Always always great to hear.
We are eating more cereal. This is in fact more cereal than last episode,
This
which I
is
think we
yeah.
are really fulfilling our name.
I
And I'm
think
proud
we
of
are.
that.
All right. So, um, first off, thank you for anyone who's listening right
Of
now and
course. Thank
watching.
you.
We
Thank you
appreciate it
for
so much.
listening to us
We
rant.
would we would like to mention though that next episode
Big
will be
episode
our
next episode.
first big episode. This will be our first episode
Huge.
with a guest.
A
We
guest
won't a
appearance.
guest speaker. I know you're going to be listening to this, so you're going to know who you are.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But we won't tell who it is yet. But you will be
Well, we will
learning who it
announce
is
it beforehand.
in like the
We'll see.
next week and a half,
Of
probably
course.
week or
Yep.
so. But yeah, so our next episode will be our first episode with a a guest speaker. We'll probably do these every other few episodes. We don't want to do it
Yep.
every episode because that's too much, but we'll
Because
probably
we're
do it.
selfish. Yeah, of
Exactly,
course.
we are. Yeah.
We want the spotlight here, Dar. This
We
is,
want the spotlight here.
this
Yeah.
is why we're making this podcast, so we can feel
Exactly.
better about ourselves, of course.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
No shade to the guests though. It's always nice to have an extra point of view,
Exactly. But
especially
yeah.
when talking about stuff like this, because we
Mhm.
are not, Dar and I are not the end all be all for video game opinions. So
No, we're not. All right.
it's always nice to have more.
Well,
But yeah,
thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next
of
episode.
course. Thank you all.